Welcome to Riz Extra. We're talking with a best-selling author and journalist Greg Palast, whose latest work is Steal Back Your Vote. And he's discussing the issue of potential voter fraud in this election. Greg, glad to have you with us for this Riz Extra segment. Fox News is devoting a lot of time to the Acorn story. And I wonder, has it become a strategy to try to discredit elections before they take place by raising allegations of fraud?
It's a con. I've never seen anything like it. What they're doing is they're accusing a Democratic affiliated group, and they're definitely Democrats, of registering fraudulent voters. So with Bobby Kennedy for Rolling Stone magazine, we investigated this. We asked the Republican Party, said there are 5 million fraudulent voters. We said, okay, give us 5 names, just 5. They gave us the 5 names. And not one of them, not a single one, was a fraudulent voter. And, you know, for example, they said a woman named Patricia White was a fictitious voter, that they just made her up. Well, we talked to her, and she didn't seem made up to me. You know, there was another woman that they said 2 people had used the same name because there were 2 signatures. Well, it was a waitress who had signed one form on a table and one form in her hand so that she had 2 different signatures. This is their big fraud. 5 million fraudulent voters, and you got a waitress in a hurry, and that's their big fraud. Now, why would they even bother? There are no fraudulent voters in the United States. Really, it almost never happens. Only 24 people have been convicted of voter fraud in the United States in 4 years out of 178 million voters. So why are the Republicans complaining?
Although I think there was the accusation there was, Greg, wasn't it, that some of the Acorn staff were involved in fabricating names and creating false registrations?
Yeah, but none of those people vote. Mickey Mouse doesn't vote. There's been no big cartoon rodents voting. These people do not, they just don't vote. So it's baloney. But why would they bother? And the answer is that the Republican Party is covering up its own fraud on a massive, massive scale. And some of it is what I would call legalized fraud. There's a new law that was signed by George Bush called the Help America Vote Act. Now, George Bush is helping us vote, which is very, very scary. And one way he's helping us vote is he's telling elections officials in the states, especially Republican elections officials, that they have the right to eliminate voters from the voter rolls on any suspicious grounds. So, for example, in Colorado, which is a state that may decide the entire election, in Colorado, the Republican elections officials removed 1 in 5 voter names, just vanished. When these people show up to vote next Tuesday, their names are going to be gone.
Okay.
You're going to see at least 3 million voters whose names have just simply vanished. And unfortunately, it's people of color, it's people with Islamic names, it's Hispanic voters, it's indigenous voters. Basically, these are all Democratic voters.
Let me ask you about that. The popularity of the Obama campaign and its drive to register new voters, has that posed any specific new challenges?
Yeah, what's happening is that the Republicans feel threatened. Look, I'm not an Obama supporter. I wrote the comic book Steal Back Your Vote, not because I want to steal the votes back for Obama. I think that Americans should have the chance to vote. And our voting rules in America have gotten so incredibly complex, it's getting almost impossible to vote. New voters, for example, there's all kinds of new rules which Republicans have put in the way of new voters voting. Nearly a third of the new voters who have signed up to vote, this is brand new, have had their registrations thrown out. That is, they won't be able to vote because they were checking their names against a government database, and the government database is a complete mess. So that because the government database is a mess, real citizens are losing their vote. And again, it's all to protect the voting rolls from fraudulent voters who don't exist. So we're literally losing 3 million voters under laws to protect against fraudulent voting by just 24 fraudulent voters in the entire nation.
Now, Greg.
So, and yeah, that's how they're doing
well,
it.
you know, I was thinking in the U.S., it's those who are convicted felons are not allowed to vote, and many people outside the U.S. feel this is a very harsh policy. Do you think that should change?
Well, in fact, it's not really true. I'm the reporter that broke the story about how Catherine Harris and Jeb Bush, the president's brother, removed thousands of voters in Florida as felons, convicts, ex-cons who can't vote. Florida is one of the only states in the country that had that rule. In that case, those are all innocent people. Most of them are black people. And that's how they stole the election of 2000. They literally stole it by removing black voters, calling them criminals, and they weren't. But in fact, in the United States, only 4 states out of 50 stop ex-cons from voting, yet the Republican Party, this year I've caught them removing ex-cons in Colorado, in New Mexico, in California. They've been removing people with criminal records who serve their time. They are allowed to vote in America. There is no such rule against these people voting in America, yet they're being stopped by officials. And of course, they're pretty defenseless. Someone who's been convicted of a crime doesn't have a lot of defenders. And they're losing their votes. And they're losing their votes because they're Democrats, not because they're convicts.
Now, Greg, it's interesting. Many people around the world feel the 2000 and 2004 votes were effectively stolen or wrongly judged in the end. And they wonder whether or not the US should really be pushing its model of democracy on the rest of the world when it has so many problems trying to get a vote right at home. What do you think?
Well, let's face it. It's kind of strange that we send our soldiers to Iraq to drop democracy from a B-52, and we can't get it in Florida. I mean, in fact, one of the horrible tricks that we found, and I say we because I'm working with Bobby Kennedy, and we describe it in our little comic book, Steal Back Your Vote. We found that the Republican Party was sending letters to soldiers' households. Soldiers who've gone to Iraq, when their letters came back undelivered because they were in Iraq because they weren't home, they challenged their right to vote. So literally the Republican Party is using this, is knocking off American soldiers' votes because they've gone to Iraq, because as you can imagine, most American soldiers aren't too crazy about being there anymore, so they're not voting for the Republican Party.
All right. Well, Greg Palast, thank you very much for joining us for this Riz Extra.
Thank you very much.
All right. And Greg Palast's comic book work is called Steal Back Your Vote. You can find out more at stealbackyourvote.org. That's the website. Thank you for joining us for this Riz Extra. We'll see you next time.